And also, if you look at the projectile gravity scale, it says set to 0 for no gravity. Now this is 1, so which is like completely full gravity. The full gravitational acceleration will apply to this bullet. So the moment you fire it out from your gun, it's going to just drop onto the ground. Okay, that's what the 1 means. So I don't need this much. I don't need this gravity at all. I at the same time, I do not want no gravity. I want some gravity, so I'm going to keep it at a bare minimum of 0.05. So which means that when it travels a distance, it's gonna, the gravity is gonna affect the bullet over a good period of distance. So that makes it sort of realistic. Exactly. Of course, it's still in the testing phase right now. We just want to get the projectile out of the weapon and watch something move out first. And once that happens, then we can start tweaking the speed of the projectile, and maybe you can even look it up on the Wikipedia about the muzzle velocity of the gun itself, and maybe use all of that information to set up your projectile. But we're not going to do any of that. But we might just tweak a little bit more to the projectile to make it look better and make it behave better. So that's it for now. This should do good for our testing purposes. So I'm going to compile, save that, and I'm going to come out. I think I'll just come out of this, and let's open up our. So now I'm going to go inside my character, not the character, but the weapons, and I'm going to open up my weapon base, and I'll be creating an event for the firing itself. Instead of creating it inside the controller, I'm going to create it inside the weapon base. This is my AK-47, and if you have other weapons like sniper or RPG, you can have the same kind of fire event. And so I'm going to create that. So this is the weapon base, and inside here, I'm going to first get rid of all of these bubbles. I kind of get annoyed at them. So first I'll be creating a custom event, and I'll simply call this fire. Now this can be used as a base class for other weapons. So maybe you can change this during runtime and whatnot. The skeleton mesh can be changed during runtime and whatnot. But all the weapons have to be around, maybe the orientation of the weapon and everything has to match. So that's why it's been created as a base class, so that you have to plan this accordingly or well ahead of time. If this is what the weapon looks like, this is the orientation of the AK-47, then you should also have your other weapons oriented in the same way, right? So for now, I will be creating the fire event, and I'll say spawn actor from class. Okay, spawn actor from class, and I'll be selecting our projectile base, and it also needs a spawn transform. Now, where is it going to spawn this? Now, of course, it has to spawn exactly at the muzzle of the gun, and we don't have that yet, right? We don't have anything to supply it with. So in our case, this is what I'm going to close all of this and blend space as well. And inside the weapon base, and not the weapon base, if I look at my, let's say, skeleton mesh, and if I go over to my skeleton mesh itself, and if I open this up, now this does not really have any sockets, right? And I want the projectile, as for any gun, to be coming out from here and not from anywhere else in the gun. It has to come out from this muzzle. So I'll have to set up a socket inside this, somewhere here in the barrel, or maybe down or somewhere up here. Doesn't matter, we'll test it out. But somewhere in this area, I'll set up a socket, and I'll reference that socket onto out here in the event graph, and then I'll extract the location of that socket or transform of that socket and supply it to the spawn transform. So I'll also close the soldier. I don't need it right now. And so let's create a socket for this first. So let's go over to the skeleton, or the skeleton of this particular mesh. So I'm clicking on the skeleton, and there you can see that you have the skeleton along with all the bones. Now we have just one bone, that is the whole mesh itself. There are no other bones here. So we'll have to create a socket and attach it to the front of the gun here. So again, you right click and you add a socket, and I'll just maybe call this projectile. Okay, and I'll have to position it all the way to the top. So right now it's here, it's around the magazine of the gun. So I'll have to push it, not this, just the projectile. I'll have to select the projectile and push it all the way to the top and position it exactly where I want the projectile to be coming out from. Okay, so again, click that and see that the position is right. Okay, maybe a little bit out here and towards the bottom so that it's coming out from here. Okay, I think that's okay. And we'll worry about the rotation and everything later on. We just want to see the projectile coming out, and once we spot that, then we can fine tune the position and the rotation of, or the transform of this particular projectile. Okay, so maybe I'll just move the projectile further towards the mouth of the gun, something like this. I'm fine with that, and as I said, we'll worry about the rotation later on. I'm pretty sure that this has to be rotated with the x-axis or the forward facing out of this, or the forward matching with the forward of the AK itself. But we'll do that later. For now, I just want to see the projectile coming out. Okay, so I'll save that and I'll go back to my weapon base out here. And now if you compile this, it's still going to give it's actually going to give us an error. And you can see that it says spawn transform pin is invalid and spawn transform. So it doesn't have any spawn transform. It doesn't know where to transform it. If you're not giving any spawn, if you're not supplying any spawn transform to this particular function, then it does not know where to spawn it. It's actually a null pointer. It needs at least something, even if it's at the origin of 0, 0, 0, it needs some sort of transform coming inside as an input for this function. So the way we're going to access this particular projectile socket is we'll drag the skeleton mesh out here. And once you get a reference of the skeleton mesh, you can just say get socket, and you have all of these functions, or all of these functions that are related to socket for the skeleton mesh. You have the get socket bone name, you have get all socket names, get attached socket name, get socket location and rotation, and finally the transform as well. So when you say the transform, it also gets the scale along with it. And it also gets the location and the rotation, of course, because that's what forms a transform. So this is exactly what we want. So when I say get socket transform and I connect it to the spawn transform now, okay, now I have to give it a socket name. If I go back to my skeleton, and I can either copy that or I can remember that and come back and put it. But it has to be, the name has to be, that has to match the name that is given inside the skeleton mesh. Okay, else it's not going to work. So I've copied that and I'm pasting it here just so that I don't make any mistakes. So now I can compile it and save it. Now when I hit the fire button, which I don't have yet, I have not bound it yet, that's going to be a next step. So once I hit that, then this is going to be I'm going to call this fire function, and it's going to be spawning a projectile base BP, or the capsule that we have, and it's going to spawn it at exactly this socket, and the transform has been already given from here. Great. So now I'll save and I'll go back, and you have to open your project settings if you have to bind any inputs. So I'll go over to inputs, and I'm going to make some action mappings here. So right now we just have jump and reset VR, and inside axis mapping you have all of these. So we're not going to look at axis mapping. Axis mappings are fine. We have all of that. We have all of that set up and it's working, but we don't have a fire yet. So we're going to create a fire action mapping, and then from there we'll take it off. Okay, so I'm gonna cut short the video now, and when we return, we're gonna bind the input, and then we're gonna go over to the third person character or the weapon base and look for that event when it fires, and then we're gonna call the fire event. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.